Next up from Sweden, we have Samuel Kastberg. So Samuel is a senior custom engineer at Microsoft who has been with the conference for multiple years meanwhile. And today, Sam takes us through setting up, build, and deploy pipelines for BizTalk server projects by using Azure DevOps. And in between, he shares tips and tricks to make your deployment successful. So Samuel, the floor is all yours.
Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for having me. So today we're going to talk about building and releasing your BizTalk applications using Azure DevOps. So what to expect from the session and what not? You shouldn't expect the perfect process. It's your job to make all these techniques and create the pipelines that are perfect for your context. But you can expect to get a lot of tips and tricks to handle your BizTalk project deployments. I will demo a number of things that you can use with Azure DevOps, but also if you have other tools. So I have implemented this with customers that actually have not a single thing within Azure DevOps, and it works. So you have a set of scripts that I already shared on my GitHub repo, where that you can use in your deployment. So just to have fun. So if we look a little bit on the playground we have today, we have a number of VMs that I have in Azure, and the environment looks like I have this self-hosted build agent that I need for BizTalk. I have a dev environment that is one single machine that is dev that I will be doing the deployment to, and I have my test environment that is 2 BizTalk servers and a SQL Server cluster in the backend. I have used Git for my repos. I use 2 of them. I use the BizTalk build artifacts. There is a repo where I have common components, scripts that I will use on several different projects that I will deploy. And then I have the project itself that I will be deploying, and that's a BTS car sample that is just a BizTalk project, so to say. I will be using artifacts, so I will deploy some of the components as Nuget packages to the artifacts collections. And of course, we will be using the Azure pipelines. For that, I have chosen to install agents on all the servers where I have the Azure DevOps mark here. I prefer to have the local execution. That makes the testing and creating the scripts a lot simpler. So that's my choice, but it's completely possible to create scripts that actually does the deployments remotely. If we look at the test environment where I have multiple servers, I consider BTS1 as the primary server and BTS2 as a secondary. And as we will see later, I will do a little bit different things on them. For secrets, I have chosen to save them in release variables in my releases. I could have used Key Vault instead, so it's a question of choice during this setup. In a production environment, I probably would use Key Vault. But if you're using some other vault, you could probably adapt your setup to use that. For packaging, I have chosen to use the BizTalk application project that came together with the task that for Azure DevOps that the product group released. So if we start talking about the build server, but before that, we are going to start to do have it to work a little bit. So if we go to my pipelines, here I have a pipeline that I want to get triggered. So I will just do a little change here. So I trigger a build. So I save that. Something like that. And now it should have started. So now we have that. So while that works, that will take a while, we talk a little bit about the build server. It's quite straightforward, actually, to set it up. In my environment, I have an updated Windows. I have installed the .NET 4.8 targeting package and the entire Visual Studio 2019. If you look at the description of the Azure pipeline agent, it should be enough with the build tools, but it's not enough for the BizTalk projects. Because you will need the BizTalk Server Visual Studio extension, something that I have installed also. I have also installed BizTalk Server Developer Edition on the machine, including the prereqs, but I haven't configured it. It's just the server itself. So, and the pipeline is installed on it. And if we look at my agent pools, here I have the pool where I have my agents for BizTalk 2020. And this is the one that is online at the moment. And if we look here, we have a number of capabilities. And there is one that I'm especially interested in, and that's the BTS install path. You know, that's the environment variable that when you install BizTalk, it's added. So that one I will be use later. So I ensure that when my build starts, it's actually get directed to one agent that is the one that I want to have. So then we have the artifacts library. So today you're using Nuget packages, and it's extremely easy to actually create your own feed where you can place your own Nuget packages. And for BizTalk, you have a lot of components that you might want to have. Let's say you have some canonical schemas, you have some pipeline components that you want to have, or some libraries that you want to have. Why not publish them as Nuget packages instead of eventually, the worst case, having just a project reference? So if you go to the artifacts section in your project, here you can create feeds. So just click on create feed, and you give it a name and configure it, and you will have the feed ready to be used. I have already published the schema here. If I want to connect to this feed, just click on connect, and here you have a list of different tools that you can use to access this. And for Visual Studio, I'm interested here in this. So here you have the exact description on how you do, and this is something you need to do on all the all the developer machines. So let's go to a developer machine, and we go to this project from this one. And if I go to tools and options, I have the Nuget package manager, and here I have the package sources. So here I can add a plus, and then just paste the link that I had copied, and then give it a good name, and then just you actually have it accessible from this project. I've already done that. So here I have, if you see in my project, that I have at the moment Nuget.org. If I change to my BizTalk 2020 artifacts, I have the Nuget package there, and then I install this schema, and I have the reference, and I know that this is the schema, that the version that we actually want to have. So going back to the slides, if we look at the BizTalk server application, it packages the results. So when you build, it packages to a zip file. How the zip file will look like is something that you describe in the BizTalk server inventory JSON. I have created a script that I share in the GitHub repo that helps you adding, if you haven't done that already, it can add the project to your solution and update references and doing some scaffolding that you will need. In this, you need also binding. So when you're going to deploy, you will need to deploy and have the bindings included in your package. But some values will differ from dev to test to production. So you need to have some way of actually, when you're doing your release, to use the current values. So the proposed solution is that you replace these values, like here, you have the address and you have the handler and so on, that you replace with a token instead of a value. You will also, among the examples, you will have a script that helps you get started with actually automating this. So you actually go into and replace these values with tokens that you can then later on work with. When you build, something else will happen. The file will, the JSON file, the inventory file will be changed. And they will add all the tokens that you have in your bindings file will be added to the tokens list. So if you're implementing later on your own solution to do replacement of these tokens, you actually have a list of what tokens you should expect to have. If we take a look at the project that I have, it's this one. It's quite standard BizTalk project. So I have, you see, we have the transforms, we have schemas, orchestrations, library, and so on. And here I have the BizTalk server application project. I open the inventory file and we see that we have the different DLLs that I need. If it's a BizTalk artifact, I add it to the BizTalk assemblies. If it's bindings, you add it to the bindings, of course, collection, and then you have assemblies that are other things that, other assemblies that you want to have. And also you have the deployment sequence. The deployment sequence is in which order you're going to do your release. So in this case, we're going to deploy first the library, then we take the schemas, the transforms, and so on, and finally the bindings. And if we look at the bindings file I have here, we can see that I have done some replacements that I already showed you, and I have further some more here in the transport type data. You see that I have like username and password for my SFTP user. Then we have one more thing that is interesting here, and that is the schema. I wanted the schema project to end up finally in my artifacts collection as a Nuget package. For that, I need a specification. So I have this file, the new spec file, just describing how the package should look like and what should be included in it. So that is what will be used later on the build to do the deploy. So let's go to the slides again. So now I have my build, and I will do a couple of things. But before that, we go through this. We go and look at the results of the latest build that we did. So we go to our pipelines. and we had the integrate rocks execution, and we look at the job, and here we see the results after the pipeline ended. So we see that we have one artifact, and in the artifacts collection, we have the Nuget package and the zip file that contains the project itself. I go back here. If I look at the job, I see all the steps that I have taken. And if we go into the edit the pipeline itself, we do some zoom in so you see better. And I've done a couple of things here. So I have one repo, as I told you before, with scripts that I will reuse over and over again in different builds, so to say. So here I include with the name build artifacts, I include the repo BizTalk 2020, that is the name of my project, and then the name of the repo itself, and which branch I'm going to use on that one. Then next thing I have is that I have to say, okay, what pool I am going to build my do my build on, and that will be the SK 2020 dev pool, and then I have the demand BTS install path, because eventually you have several servers in your pool that eventually have different capabilities, and some of them don't have the BizTalk installed. Eventually you have build agents that you want to build, one for 2016 and one for 2020, let's say. Then you could have your own environment variable and decide out of that, adapt the demand to address that. If we look further on here, it's normal stuff. Here I have one of the scripts that I use that comes in the build artifacts repo, and it the build, when I download the data, it creates a folder with the name of the repo, and there you have all the scripts as accessible. So I call this one to set the assembly file version of info file version of my DLLs. Then I do some copying, I'm building, and then finally I created the Nuget package and publish, so we get the result that we were looking at. So going back to this presentation. So I linked in the repo, the extra repo, so to say. I had my demand, so I addressed the right pool, and then I used the scripts that I have in common. And we saw the packages, both the Nuget package and the zip file, as the result of the build. So now we have a couple of packages. You could have done here before in the build. You could have done the release to the artifacts collection yourself in that. But I decided that I want to do that myself. I want to control when things happens there. So if I go to my releases, here I have the BTS car sample schemas artifact, and I can create a release for that, and it will end up when it's done, it's queued, and finally we will have the artifact here in my artifacts collection. That takes a little while. So meanwhile, we start looking at deploying. So when deploying, I have created one deployment group for each environment. So a deployment group is, so to say, a collection of targets. So look here, and I have two deployment groups. I have the BizTalk Dev, and I see that I have one target there. And I have test where I have the two servers, and we see what releases have been released on them. So then we have we'll start doing the work, and for that I use PowerShell, and I want to be proactive. I want to have as little downtime as possible if downtime is needed. So I want to check on things before I actually start doing some validation, doing some deployment. So I do some validation. So, and that could be checking, do we have any active instances? Is my application referred by other ones? So I have other applications that are dependent on them. And that kind of things. It could be like with one customer, we did checks here at this stage. We actually did the validation of the bindings. So we actually could see if we had some mix up with servers. So we have, like for the dev environment, we have a list of allowed servers or disallowed servers. So we did a check anyway that verified that in the bindings we only had servers that we were interested in, and that was due, of course, of some problems we had along the way. So if we look at the validation, we go to the developer machine and look here in the check application. So here I have a script that checks. You get the BizTalk application. In this case, in this pipeline, I don't care about it, so I haven't done anything about it. But next thing is I'm checking if I have any instances that are live. So and if we look here, what I'm doing is that I'm calling the operational data service. So I'm saying, okay, go to the instances and the filter on properties application, and it should be the name of the application that I'm deploying now. And I get top one. So the first instance, and I'm just interested in one. If I have one instance, I want to fail. If I fail calling, if the call fails for some reason, I write an error and I return as if I had some instances, and then I will fail here saying, hey, this application has instances, and then I fail. And the same with back references. For back references, I use the management service. And those are quite quick. It works very, very, very fast, a lot faster than if you would do it with WMI or Explorer OM. So if we go here and we go to my pipelines and the releases, and we see that I have here a release 61 here. Done a lot of releases last couple of days, and we have one that succeeded in development, and now it's ready for going to test. So I approve this, and it will start deploying. Now it's downloading, and we will soon come to the validation here. And when it executes the script, it fails. And it fails because the car sample had instances, and it does it on both servers. So that way I didn't go forward and executing things that would give me more job. So next thing that I do is I change the values in the bindings files. So I use a component tokenizing archive that goes into the zip file, opens the bindings files and replaces all the tokens that I had with the values that I have in variables in my pipeline. So if we go and look at the pipeline, and we go here, and we check here, sorry. Here we have, for the different environments, I changed like this. Sorry, I have to, yeah. So here we see that I have values for test and dev, and these are the tokens that I'm going to replace. For common variables that I reuse over and over, I have variable groups, and it will, if I would use Key Vault, I would link in as a variable group the values from Key Vault in here that way. Then I will extract the files and start deploying my application. We get back to that and check on the scripts. Then finally, or after that, we're going to delete the bindings and the zip file because we have secrets in there. So it's important to do that so you don't have secrets lying around there, and then start the application. I have chosen to use the PowerShell provider, and that doesn't work with the 64-bit. So if I do a choice like that, there are some components with BizTalk administration that don't work on 64-bit, then you can restart the PowerShell script with start itself, but start it in the 32-bit session, and that works perfectly. And here you have an example, a little function, and you provide values for that, and it will restart itself, and that works perfect. So I told you validation using the operational data service. You can check instances and back references using the management service, and here you see an example of the back references. And we have looked at the PowerShell script. And we have looked also into the values and variables that will be that we will be replacing in the files. The secrets, as I told you, as variables, secret variables in the pipeline, or you can use Key Vault. Again, delete your bindings when you're done. Then we come to deploying the application. You have a couple of different choices here. You can use the PowerShell provider. That was the choice I did. You can use BTS task. You can also use for at least for the application, you can use the management API. So for BTS task, you have the product group created the BizTalk server application deployment task. If you want to get inspired from that, if you want to use BTS task, you can get a lot of inspiration there. So you, on your service, if you use it one time, you will get the scripts there, and you can look into them and get inspired or use them. It's completely okay to do that. I prefer to do it this way, just to tweak it a little bit more than that. I differentiate between primary and secondary servers. We will see that in this moment, we need to delete and create or update the application. That is something that you choose. I have chosen to delete and create. And then we add and write the resources if we have them there, and we set a description. Use that. It's really a good tool. So if we go to my server here, I have a script that is called install BizTalk zip package. And we look here, I import a module, GAC module, that is really, really nice. And another module that I have written myself. And then I check, okay, if I'm the primary. So I have this variable, environment variable that I set. If it's primary, okay, then I will remove the application. Then I create a string with some information that will end up in the description of the application. And then we create the application. So if we look at the environment, and if we look at the properties here, we see the description. And one of the things that we can see here is what release did we use. And I think this is quite handy. I've used it in real cases, and it's really valuable information. We even had information on who triggered. We did manual releases. We could include the information who actually started the release. And then if this is the secondary, we don't do anything. And then we process the inventory, and there we have just take the JSON file that we had from the BizTalk application project. And then if it's the primary, we have a for each looping in the deployment sequence. So we get everything in the right order. And then we add BizTalk assembly, just assembly, and finally import the bindings. So we just do everything in the right order. And if this is the secondary server, we just call the add GAC assembly, and we get the things in place. So we have seen that we have done a build. We have resources that we have published to our artifacts collection, and we have seen that we could do a release where we validated things before we actually did the release. You have all the scripts in my GitHub repo. So here I created a new folder, and here you have some utils, and you have the deployment scripts there, and then you have the GAC module for PowerShell in the PowerShell gallery, and the tokenize in archive in the Visual Studio Marketplace. And if you look later on the shared slides, you have in the slides, not on all, but in most of them, you have links to more information on the different topics that I talked about there. I think we are good in time. Is that correct?
Yeah, Samuel. I guess we have another 10 minutes. No problem.
Okay, perfect. So then we can show just a little bit here. Sorry, there. No, wrong place. So here we had the suspended instance. I terminate in the test environment like that. Now it's gone. So now we can go to my pipeline again that had failed, and I say, okay, redeploy. We approve. And now it's in progress. And now when this is done, it should be passing. So while this is working, so you actually see that it worked, we can start looking at questions. Do we have any questions?
There are a few questions in the Q&A tab.
Are you able to access the questions of the Q&A tab, Samuel?
Yes.
Or would you like me to read it out for you?
I can see them. Benefits and drawbacks using MS deployment JSON versus using BTDF. I mean, if you already have a fully working BTDF, I don't see that I would change that process. If you already have a really good process, I wouldn't do that much about it. I would stick to that if you don't have any issues. So it's yeah. I think that's my point on that. What is the advantage exposing BizTalk artifact assemblies Nuget package? Yeah, well, you have sometimes you have. I've seen a lot with a lot of customers. When you, even if you're the only consumer, I've seen a lot of customers that actually have, okay, they have the repo, and instead of lifting in the binaries, just a reference to the binaries, they are including the project into the solution, and then they sometimes they do a change without thinking about it, having the project reference, including a project in another solution. They infer some changes that are not good. So I think it's a better practice to things that you will reuse, like a schema that is canonical, you release it as a binary that you include. So that's my point on doing that. And I think, okay, that was a response. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, you can definitely use the task. So how about Microsoft deploy BizTalk application instead of custom PowerShell? You can absolutely do that. So it's more if you want to do more tweaking on that. So this is just an alternative to other solutions. So there is no, so it's better, I would say, depending on what you like. From my perspective, I can tweak this process a little bit more. And also for me, it's interesting that I work with customers that don't just use Azure DevOps. So that's one of the things. Can the pipelines be access controlled? Yeah, yes. I mean, you have, let me see, the pipelines. Yes, I'm quite sure you can do that, that you have different users for the service that does the release. I'm not that expert on Azure DevOps, so that I would direct that question to a DevOps expert. But I'm quite sure you can fix that. Yes. So when releasing to multiple BizTalk server, configure as cluster task, use the BizTalk server application deployment in release pipeline. After release to each server, deployed application is starting automatically. For now, we are stopping the host instances and doing the releases. How to control this? So if you're doing the releases this way, you control when you actually start the applications again. So that's one of the points of of tweaking the process and doing that with your own scripts. BizTalk deployment framework. It has a setting how to start application on deploy or something like that. Just set it to false. Okay. But that was, I'm not sure that was the application, the BizTalk deployment framework. I think it was two different things. How are we doing on time? I think we have a couple of minutes more. So the BizTalk deployment DevOps task creates shares on the BizTalk server that it never cleans up. Any reason for that? I have no idea. It's a choice they did. I would introduce, like in this, I haven't included any cleaning up of these folders. So that is, if I look to the with the customers where we have implemented this, we have implemented some kind of cleanup, just keeping the last two or something like that deployments on the servers. Yeah, so it's, but I can't respond on why they did that choice. Hello, Kai. How do we avoid getting lots of pipelines if we have hundreds of BizTalk applications? Well, you will probably have a pipeline for each application that you do, but you can create your like templates to do that. You have to direct that question to a DevOps expert, how you eventually could tweak this to be more flexible. But that would eventually mix up a little bit applications to applications. Do we need to create PowerShell files before and include them on the artifacts and then execute the pipeline? So these PowerShell scripts is something that I have written. So yes, you have to, if you want to tweak the process, you have to write or adapt the PowerShell scripts here. So it's nothing that is added for you, but so it's more a way of handling that. Thank you for your time and enjoy Integrate 2021.
Cove.co